Briahna, what's on your radar?
Well, it's big news in progressive world yesterday as Congressional Progressive Caucus weighed in on the Ohio 11th rematch between Senator Nina Turner and Shontel Brown. Now, Nina Turner is the co-chair of the Bernie 2020 campaign, is a supporter of Medicare for All, a $15 minimum wage, the Green New Deal, and student debt cancellation. She takes no corporate money and last summer was able to outraise her opponent with small dollar donations alone. Shontel Brown, on the other hand, was funded by Republican donors in her last race, faced an ethics probe for awarding millions of dollars to her partner's company, and just received a $1 million ad by a crypto billionaire who has supported a number of Republican senators. She has not only taken money from right-aligned individuals like Trump ally and Patriots owner Robert Kraft and former chair of the Cuyahoga Republican Party, some of her most substantial financial support during last year's special election came from Democratic Majority for Israel, a conservative PAC that donated to Republican candidates like Lindsey Graham, and through which individual conservative donors laundered donations to Brown. So you might think that the choice for the Progressive Caucus endorsement was an obvious one. But if you assumed that the Progressive Caucus would be supporting Senator Nina Turner, you'd be wrong. So what seems to be the rub this time around? Why has Pramila Jayapal's caucus made the switch from supporting fellow Bernie alum and alleged ideological ally Nina Turner to Shontel Brown, a corporate-funded candidate who seems to offer the left little other than fidelity to the establishment Democratic agenda? I'm sure more details about the decision will come out over the coming weeks, but to much of the left, this decision is but the latest in a long line of disappointments from Jayapal, who some are dismissing as a progressive leader altogether. And when you assemble all the evidence, it's clear why so many progressives are considering cutting the cord with the Democratic Party altogether. Now, progressives first became skeptical of Jayapal back in January of last year, when some voters and media figures, including myself, were pushing for progressives in the House to withhold their vote for Nancy Pelosi to be Speaker of the House in order to gain any concessions for the left. Because of the narrow margins in the House, any 6 or so progressives had the power to hold up Pelosi's nomination for Speaker in exchange for concessions like, say, better committee appointments, ending pay-go, ousting Richie Neal, a Medicare for All opponent from the Ways and Means Committee, or having a hearing on Medicare for All, a crucial issue at the time when the pandemic was raging and no vaccine was yet available. When asked, Jayapal explained away her decision not to exploit one of the last remaining leverage points for the left by saying that she would not force the vote because she feared that Republican Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy might become Speaker of the House if she did. Of course, that wouldn't be possible unless a significant number of Democrats were to vote for Republican McCarthy, an extremely unlikely outcome. Even if progressives abstained from voting for Pelosi and McCarthy got more votes, absolutely, he would not become Speaker of the House unless he got more than half of the total votes in the House, not just a bare majority. So Jayapal is either ignorant to the point of concern about House procedure or she lied, and neither is an especially reassuring outcome. Strike two for Jayapal centered around the fight for a $15 minimum wage. Remember that a minimum wage raise was initially included as part of the 2021 COVID relief bill. At that time, it was reported that some progressives considered holding up the entire COVID package unless a $15 minimum wage was included in the bill. In an interview with Ryan Grimm on his podcast Intercepted, Jayapal revealed that progressives had successfully threatened to do something similar to ensure extended unemployment benefits were in the bill. And it worked. But when it came to the fight for 15, an enormously popular policy, well, Jayapal threw that fight. After the $15 minimum wage was stripped from the bill, it was reported that, quote, when a $15 minimum wage increase fell out of the package because of Senate rules, some Democrats considered withholding their votes entirely. Jayapal helped persuade those members to support the deal without the minimum wage raise. Et tu, Brute? Since then, Jayapal has been one of Biden's biggest boosters. Instead of using her position to drive home the extent to which Biden has betrayed his fairly moderate campaign promises, she described him thusly last summer, shortly after the $15 minimum wage debacle. President Biden has risen to the moment, she said, and I really do give him an A in what he's done so far. It's been bold. It's been progressive. It's been what the country needs. Polls disagree. Here's more evidence. When Progressive Squad member Rashida Tlaib made a speech on behalf of the Working Families Party following the State of the Union address this year, Jayapal seemed almost miffed that she'd stepped out of line. Here she is speaking to Mehdi Hassan.
I just want people to understand the Progressive Caucus doesn't give a response to the president. We will all be out there talking about what we thought. And I believe that the president's going to raise some really important progressive priorities.
Big she doesn't speak for me energy here. So much for progressive unity. Moreover, whereas some progressives, like AOC, warned Democrats that separating Biden's traditional infrastructure bill from the human infrastructure bill, Build Back Better, was a mistake, Jayapal went through with the plan and even said later that she had, quote, no regrets about doing so. That was the moment Biden's agenda died, and Jayapal had no regrets about it. Everyone with eyes could see that Manchin was lying when he said he'd support the human infrastructure bill if only they passed the traditional bill first. It was a Lucy, Charlie Brown in the football moment, as obvious as the nose on my face, but Jayapal pursued that agenda-killing strategy with impunity and apparently without regret. Now, I'm not the only one who has noticed this pattern of Jayapal playing cleanup for corporate Democrats. Just listen to Rachel Maddow and Lawrence O'Donnell unironically applaud her ability to spin political guano into gold.
And then your show's optimist-in-chief, Congresswoman Jayapal, actually presents an optimistic view of what's next. She actually does it, and it's real. I listen to it. I sit there with all my experience trying to tear it apart, and no, it's real. It's legitimate. And I got to say, she's brilliant at it diplomatically in her presentation of it. But it's just my favorite thing to watch. To watch those words of optimism just washing over you, and you just, making them, let them get into your heart and go on with life that way.
It is like a recurring bit on this show. You're completely right that I bring Congresswoman Jayapal on and I say, looks to me like nothing can happen. Looks to me like it's all over. Whew, this was a dark one. And she's every single time, I hear you, Rachel, but actually. And then she's got something to say that is not pie in the sky and is not some made up thing and is not like there'll be better days ahead. She always has some constructive thing that can happen and some little based in reality thing that I'm not factoring into my little dark cloud. To be the chair of the Progressive Caucus is by design to always be asking for things that you are mostly not going to get. But she has this gift of asking for things and presenting the case for things in a way that is both reasonable and makes it seem likely that she is going to get at least a lot of what it is she's asking for. And that is, it works even on me. I am the original dark cloud, but it works even on me.
If you were looking for a substantive analysis in that clip, I promise you won't find one. It is nothing but empty words of optimism and, yes, a recurring bit. Now, it should perhaps come as no surprise, given her reported political ambitions, that Jayapal has been this disappointing. As David Sirota observed yesterday, quote, this is very likely Pramila Jayapal selling out the entire movement because of her unbridled ambitions to get a fancy but meaningless leadership title among a House Dem caucus that will be obliterated in the midterm elections. A total betrayal on every level. Democrats may offer some explanation for this betrayal, but all the excuses that I can think of fall flat. Democrats sometimes say they're going to support the incumbent or the candidate with the obvious lead. But when Nina Turner was pulling ahead of Brown last spring, the establishment Democratic support for Brown ramped up with endorsements from stars like Hillary Clinton and Jim Clyburn. Look at how some establishment Democrats are backing Conor Lamb over John Fetterman, despite Fetterman having better odds against Republican general election opponent Dr. Oz. And remember how establishment Democrats abandoned India Walton after she won her primary race in Buffalo, fair and square? It's becoming clearer and clearer to many progressive and populist voters that the odds of changing the Democratic Party from within, returning it to its working class roots, are growing slimmer and slimmer. And many are advocating for a clean break. After all, with allies like these, who needs enemies? If Biden is unable to boost his low poll numbers and Democrats lose one or both chambers due to apathy from the base, they'll undoubtedly blame progressives. But let the record show that progressive leadership, clamoring to be included in the in crowd, did this to themselves. And for what? For what? Now, Robbie, this has been a long time coming from my perspective, and I have wanted to give Pramila Jayapal and the Progressive Caucus the benefit of the doubt. there have been plausible outs for many of these moments as they've happened down the pike. When the force the vote moment happened, they said that we're going to hold out for a $15 minimum wage. When the $15 minimum wage happened, and the reporting was that Pramila Jayapal was the one that convinced them not to hold out and make sure that this enormously popular policy, a policy that won with 60% of the vote in red Trump Florida, wouldn't get included in the COVID relief bill. That was the final straw for me. And this, I think, is going to be the final straw for a lot of other progressives.
I hear you, but I'm just letting the optimism wash over me. Wait. Let's just wait. Oh, wait.
Isn't that clip ridiculous?
That clip was, utterly insane. When was that from?
Last fall, I think, around the time that Build Back Better failed.
As it occurred.
Yeah.
And I know this was not the subject of your radar, but it shows to you the kind of priorities of like the MSNBC pundits and I guess their viewers. Like, no, literally doing the "it's fine" dog meme thing. No, everything's fine.
Everything's fine. The house isn't burning.
Like, you could see the flames around Maddow and Lawrence.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's clear that their role, similar to what Pramila Jayapal's role seems to be serving in this moment, is to provide cover for the failures of the party as a whole, to make sure everybody feels as though Democrats are doing the best they can, when it's obviously not the case. And of course, it's true that Republicans are not doing the best that they can, and that we have a plutocracy that is betraying the interests of American voters as a whole. But my interest as a progressive in particular is making sure that the people who say that they represent my interests and are using the progressive labels do so sincerely. And I think that this latest betrayal, not supporting a woman who you worked with so recently on the campaign of the leading progressive in this country, an enormously popular independent senator from Vermont, it's going to be really difficult for people to look past. So I'm really interested to see what the continued response to this will be online and in real life. And I'm also looking forward to your radar next, Robbie.